on behalf of the Sustainable Cities Network and Project Cities program, I would like to welcome you all to our kind of first joint green infrastructure and low impact development work group meeting. We're very excited. We've been talking about doing this for a while to kind of combine forces and brain power with the Maricopa County group, which has been meeting through the Green Infrastructure Work Group, and then of course through Mead and her fellow colleagues of Southern Arizona with the Low Impact Development Work Group. And so we're very excited to join you. And I'd like to turn it over to Mead to introduce herself and kind of provide the introduction, I think, for the Southern Arizona group. So let me stop sharing. All right.
Start sharing. Welcome again. I'm Mead Mier. I work at Pima Association of Governments, and I'm here on behalf of the LID working group, as Anne said. We're down in Tucson and do work throughout Eastern Pima County. I'm going to push share on my screen. Just to give you a little background on our group for those who are less familiar. You may have heard of it for a while now. It was started around 2011. It started as a flood control group for Pima County. And our leaders of the group at that time were Anne Moynihan, who led some of the initial workshops that got the goals started, and Evan Canfield. And they had a directive to accomplish several tasks in low impact development. And they had a collaborative approach trying to work with the city of Tucson and other collaborators. And then by 2015, it grew into a regional collaborative, a more of an ad hoc group, since the flood control had accomplished many of their original goals. And I just wanted to recognize all our steering committee who've been putting it together the last few years. Besides myself, there's Irene Ogata with Tucson Water, who'll be speaking later. Marie Light from Pima County Department of Environmental Quality, who unfortunately is ill today, so we'll try to speak for her as best we can. And Neha Gupta, who is here today. She's from U of A. So as I said, as the group accomplished some efforts that you've probably already heard about, such as case studies, LID guidance manual, goal setting workshops, and really game-changing flood modeling that included LID and incorporating LID into their detention retention standards. We benchmarked that progress, and we made sure to make proud to make steady strides and set new goals. So let's see, not sure if that changed slides yet. There you go. I just wanted to mention that we welcome all those who work in green infrastructure, whether you're doing it for your neighborhood or nonprofit, for the government, consultants, academics. Our goal really is to integrate disciplines, and I'm curious to hear if the Phoenix area group has similar goals. We also have all types of disciplines involved, and that really creates more of a multi-benefit approach. Flood control, water resources, stormwater quality. Sorry, I think my slide was a little slow there. Even urban heat island health issues, environmental justice. So we have a wide range of organizations, everything from Tucson Audubon and Community Food Bank to the local jurisdictions. And we're always trying to grow to include more of the towns. So this is just a little bit about our format. We try to meet monthly. We hold presentations, primarily presentations that are interested in getting feedback and collaboration. We share updates across the board. Everyone gets a chance to chime in, and our goals are set based on who's working on what project and who wants to collaborate and where we can have a shared vision.
And our green infrastructure work group in Maricopa County started in 2011 as an outcome of our first regional tree and shade summit, which was on March 9th in 2011. Seems like forever and a day ago. And the whole purpose behind that event was really to convene different stakeholders and groups to further discussions, initiatives, and provide education resources on promoting tree and shade and green infrastructure. And so as that kind of summit, we decided that we wanted to continue talking and meeting. And so the green infrastructure work group came to be. And so it met monthly, every other month-ish, all the way up until about 2021. And we took a little bit of a break, primarily, I think, because the urban forestry roundtable discussions were starting to take off. COVID was hitting. I think people were adjusting to kind of the new reality of what was going on. And then we decided to, re-energize our discussions. And so Tim Connor is our co-chair for the Green Infrastructure Work Group. He's with the city of Scottsdale. And then Jesse Westad, who is with WERK Urban Design, is our other co-chair. So we plan to meet monthly. We have a long list of different meetings that we will be addressing. And our goal is really to facilitate discussion, make sure everybody is well connected. Also identify collaborative projects. So for example, to Mead's point, our interests have kind of ebbed and flowed based on the interests and the needs of our community participants, which include public, meaning cities, towns, tribal communities, counties, private sector, and NGOs. And so one of our, I guess, more notable outcomes is the LID Handbook, which came out in 2019, which we're very excited to talk a little bit more about as part of our discussions. And we're hoping maybe through our interaction with the Southern Arizona group, we might be able to come up with some additional activities and projects to work on that could benefit not only our Maricopa County communities, but maybe our communities statewide. So that's a little bit about the Green Infrastructure Work Group. I was going to say, Tim or Jesse, did either one of you have anything to add on behalf of our Maricopa County group in welcoming our Southern counterparts?
I'll step in, and thank you to everybody for attending today. It's great to see this kind of a turnout. It's amazing. So looking forward to sharing with you and understanding what you all are doing as well. Hopefully we'll have programs throughout the year that will be enticing to everyone for our local chapter here. But also we're going to have, I think, is it quarterly meetings we're thinking with Tucson's area or the Pima County area and us as well. So we'll have different topics on that, and everyone will have a chance to help us decide on what those topics will be. So looking forward to a great program. Jesse, do you want to talk to anything?
Yeah, basically the same thing, just trying to get like-minded individuals all together and see what we can learn from each other.
Can you guys see that? So basically it's telling, as you're inputting your preferences into the Mentimeter, it adjusts based on everybody's responses, which is really cool. I'll give it a few more minutes. Is this surprising to anybody watching this? And are you able to go on to the second one? So I think we'll go ahead and head over to our presentation. And I would like to introduce again Tim Connor and Wayne Colebank. They have been instrumental in the creation of the LID Handbook, along with Harry Cooper and Lee Paget, who is formerly with the city of Phoenix at the time. And we have many of our cities and towns represented here within Maricopa County that provided review capabilities and input in the LID handbook process. And really the whole point behind it was to standardize the standard specifications and details so the communities would all be able to implement and promote green infrastructure and LID in a more consistent manner. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tim and have him better introduce himself, as well as Wayne Colebank, and they can tell you a little bit about that. We will have our Phoenix Metro group talk first, and then we will transition over to the Southern Arizona folks as well. So they'll be talking about all of their initiatives. And also, if you do have questions, we encourage you to put them in the chat or hold them until the end of kind of the speakers presentations, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A as well. So Tim?
Yeah, let me try to share my screen here.
Okay.
Let's see. Are we there?
Yep.
Great. Okay, as Ann mentioned, this is something that was quite a joint project by a lot of the different people that are on the phone call today that are in the Phoenix metro area. And I'm just going to start out with something, if I can, there we go. Just kind of give some of you who may not be as familiar with this as we've been repeating over and over to ourselves while we were doing this project, what the definition of green infrastructure is. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be looking at an opposite screen because I've got that, that's the way my screen's set up right now. Green infrastructures, we had pulled a definition out of the ARID LID organization out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And their definition read, green infrastructure refers to a class of stormwater control measures that slow, capture, treat, infiltrate, and store the runoff at its source. And I think that at its source was always the biggest point that we were trying to get to. For the low impact development, it's an engineered stormwater management approach utilizing green infrastructure techniques, which mimic nature and manage and treat rainfall near its source using decentralized control methods to gain the benefits of GI. And I always kind of let people understand the decentralized component of that would be similar to roof-mounted solar units that you might be using for your homes locally. One of the larger benefits that we felt we wanted to reinforce and kind of keep this all shortened was basically that the green infrastructure and LID components accommodate the valley's first flush requirements. I'm not sure if that's the same requirement statewide or not, but we have a requirement that you cleanse the first half inch of a storm event before releasing it down into the other larger waterways. We found out through our research with our consultants that 82% of all the stormwater events in the valley are half inch or less. So that made sense to us to really push this forward and try to get people utilizing it. Additionally, ADEQ has different permits that are issued to different cities, one being MS4 and another being a general stormwater permit. And we're seeing that they're wanting to have more and more green infrastructure and low impact development put into their plans for the different individual cities for the permits. Going about the process, Anna mentioned that this is a collaborative process, which it really was. We had our project core team, which was City of Scottsdale, the Sustainable Cities Network with ASU, City of Phoenix, and the Flood Control District of Maricopa County. We acted as a core team. You can see us goofing around the table over here. We acted as the core team of this project, and as a group, we wrote and obtained some grants from different agencies, one being WIFA, the Water Infrastructure and Finance Authority of Arizona, and we got a $35,000 grant from WIFA by applying for it. And also ADEQ has some 604B funding for watershed planning. We received about a $44,000 grant from them. The City of Scottsdale also kicked in an additional 47,000 or so, plus or minus. All those are rounded numbers. So the whole project came to about $625,000. That did not include print costs, which we covered individually later. We hired consultants. One of them is with us today, Wayne Colebank with Logan Simpson. They were the landscape architects in the process. And we hired Double Engineering for the process as well. The attempt was to come out and create, we'd seen the the Mesa, Glendale, and ASU handbook for green infrastructure that was put out probably 2 years prior to our advancing this project. And it was a great conceptual handbook. I think that most people have seen it if you are engaged in this type of activity. We also took a deep dive into the Pima County handbook as well, because we thought that was a great example. The one thing that we noticed and we thought would be more helpful is that we wanted to get some formalized engineer details and specifications so that it would be more easy for developers, engineers, landscape architects, et cetera, to just pull from those details that they might be able to implement them easier, and hopefully also get some standardization so that communities, their review people, such as their stormwater reviews and other legal reviews that went on, would take a closer look at those details and hopefully accept them for what they were. As you can see here, we had about, I think, 9 different cities and or organizations in this plan. I'll move on to the next slide. The outcome was this Greater Phoenix Metro Green Infrastructure Handbook. This is a low impact development details for alternative stormwater management. And it captured developed 10 different details that we felt were fairly common that needed to maybe be expressed so that they could be used easily again out in the actual built environment. And hopefully that all the different design and engineering and the developing communities would start to embrace them. The way the handbook was laid out is that we had the actual detail, which was an engineered detail, which I'll discuss later, that we're making refinements to it as we go. Wayne's group put together landscape concepts for the different details. We then had also an engineering report that talked about what needed to be considered for the details, and then specifications for those types of things, for those, it's each of the details. This is a photograph from Harry that is out at the flood control district of one of the harvesting basins that was installed. The largest goal that we had for creating the handbook was to start the standardization process. And all communities have some type of standardized details that they use, or at least some kind of a guideline for design of the urban design in their environments. So our first goal was to start to get those incorporated into the different localized guidelines that are out there. But the ultimate goal was to get into this blue book, is what it's called in this area, for the Maricopa Association of Governments, which is the Uniform Standards and Specifications and Standard I didn't say it right, and Details in Public Works for Construction. So that was our ultimate goal, but also to kind of make sure we had consistent quality and implementation valley-wide. I'm going to show you 4 different slides before the ending of my little speech here, but this is the first detail that we were able to take through a subcommittee that's called the Out of Right-of-Way group that works underneath the larger standardized specifications and details committee out of MAG. And this is the first detail that was approved. It's a pervious pavement for concrete detail, and they also has associated specifications that go along with it. One of the things that we found is that the engineered detail that we provided wasn't exactly what everyone decided was the appropriate detail for our area. So we did modify the detail and changed it to the point where it made sense for the rest of the group, and it was approved by the overall committee represented by, I think, probably 27 cities in the area. So that was the first hurdle we cleared in year 1. Then in the last year, we actually had a couple of victories. The city of Phoenix came out and sponsored the curb opening details that we had, such as this section, which is a type 1 curb opening, which is essentially a curb cut. It could be done either with a saw cut or formed to be at that when they're building new, or a secondary curb cut, which is one that we actually stole from the concept from Seattle, I believe, is where we picked that one up. So we've got those two details that came through and were approved. And I was surprised, I finally was looking through the MAG details, and they actually have our sediment trap detail in there. And I know that Eric Bonds, who's on this call, had been working on that quite a bit. So we had to make modifications to that as well to gain the committee's acceptance. And so we've got 4 details under our belt. That's the end of my piece of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Wayne Colebank. Wayne's been working on landscape detailing and landscape specifications, which were way out of date. I'll send it over to Wayne. You're up, Wayne.
Okay, Tim, thanks.
Let me stop sharing here. Hold on. Okay, good. Got it.
So as Tim said, I've been working on the LID toolkit for the city of Mesa and Glendale. That happened in 2015. And then, of course, the handbook that Tim just went through. Most recently, my support for SCN has been leading a work group to develop standard landscape and irrigation specifications and details for MAG. Now, they do need these desperately. MAG's details have not, and their specifications have not changed probably in the last 30 years. But so very much a needed activity. And so with Ann's support and SCN, we have spent a 2-year odyssey in getting these standards pulled together. Now, that 2-year period was not because it was so technically difficult to get these details pulled together. Most of the information, many of the landscape architects working wherever they are in the state have most of this. What was unusual in this case was that MAG, their process took a long time for them to review and approve. They gave plenty of opportunity for the community members, the MAG members, to review these details, look at them, including the specifications. And so it took quite a bit of time to make that happen. In addition to that, because what we did was essentially rewrite all of the specifications that MAG had, which were, to be blunt, fairly anemic, and they'd been that way for a long time. So what we did was basically rewrite their specifications, and they didn't have any landscape or irrigation details. So when we came to them with all of this material, it was quite a bit for them to absorb, particularly since we were working mostly with engineers. And so you can imagine if someone comes to you with a topic or a subject and information that you're not too sure about, you're going to be fairly cautious, and they were in this case. But you understand that they had none of this information for 30 years, so it was going to take a while to get this process moved through. So that was the basis. Now, getting MAG's standard details, landscape and irrigation, up to snuff was really not the end result. That was not the end play. This was only going to be step one to get MAG up to par for current conditions for landscaping and irrigation. The second step was intended to be the LID green infrastructure details and specifications that would also go in with MAG's standards. During the process, MAG backed up on that and decided that they really, at this time, couldn't take that on. So with that position now, SCN is really the ones with the Green Infrastructure Work Group who are going to take that on. And I think you're going to hear some of that maybe from Harry and particularly with Jesse. So let me just give you a little bit of the structure of how this worked in developing these. We were part of the Landscape and Irrigation Working Group, which was a subset of the outside of right-of-way subcommittee to MAG. Now that you're wondering why it's outside of the right-of-way. Well, the intent originally by MAG was that whatever these details and specifications that were developed would be able to be used by public entities for, let's say, developing a park or a library or police station or some other public facility. And so that committee, the outside of the right-of-way committee, was formed to address some of these things. And obviously the landscaping, as we know, on private projects, people use the MAG specs and details. So that's how we got associated with that group. Now, that group, the outside of the right-of-way group, was a subset of MAG's Standards and Details Committee, and that's the ultimate committee that approves these or not. So there's several layers there of committees that have to approve these documents. But going back to the working group, the landscape and irrigation working group, just to give you a sense of the folks that we had in this group. We started out with about 40 folks of different disciplines and interests. We had folks from APS, ADOT, AMWA, all of the municipalities in MAG, some individual nurseries, the Arizona Nursery Association, Maricopa County, and even, as Harry will attest, flood control district from Maricopa County. So there were a number of folks in there, like I said, more than 40. About 10 of them were landscape architects. So that was the group that was working to develop these specifications. Some of the topics that we have provided specs and details for that did not exist before include whether or not the landscape construction by its own right would need to have a ZIPDs permit or construction general permit. There was no language anywhere to identify that. How do you protect trees and vegetation that's supposed to remain in the project area during construction? Pruning, how to do native plant salvage, native seeding, desert paving, and turf repairs, things like that, how to deal with solar controllers, lots of other details like that, that now are standards or will be very soon. And so those did not exist. And with these standards now, there will be a cost savings and a bit of standardization across the landscape construction industry in the Phoenix area and wherever these specifications and details are used. So I won't belabor it any longer, but on September 7th, so in another week or two, the final vote for the final component, which is the landscape, or I'm sorry, the irrigation details are scheduled to be voted on by the MAG Standard Committee and should that happen, which I'm very confident it will, all of these standards will be part of the January 2023 updates to MAG. So you can look forward to those coming.
Thanks so much, Wayne. And I would like to actually give a big round of applause for Wayne and the group that worked on it, because to be honest with you, I don't think Wayne quite understood how long this process would take. And yeah, it was more of a labor of love, I think, just to make sure that it got pushed through. So he's been such a trooper. And the same with Tim and the group. I just want to thank everybody for their dedication to making it all happen.
We're this close.
It was just like baby steps. Every time we thought we were that close, we'd have to take a step back and kind of rework something and then kind of move ahead. And the next part is kind of the supplement for green infrastructure, which is really exciting. So
Right.
That's kind of the next piece that's outside of the construction details, right, Wayne?
Yes.
Yeah. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Wayne and Tim. And we have a little bit of time for, excuse me, Harry Cooper with the Flood Control District, and then also Jesse Westad to provide an update too. And then we'll go ahead and take questions after that for Tim, Wayne, Jesse, and Harry. So Harry and Jesse.
Jesse, I'm not sure how you had planned on taking this
No, it's all you, Harry.
Great. Okay. So I'll just give you a brief update, and it'll only take a minute or two. So and I assume you're talking about the Durango project. So this is the Durango campus at the Flood Control District of Maricopa County, where we have our admin building and our main operations and maintenance building. It's where we all go to work. At the county. That facility has been around for 30 years. Its landscaping, irrigation, parking lot are in pretty poor shape at this point in time. So a few years ago, we looked at putting together a master plan to discuss how we could basically retrofit the entire project and incorporate as many GILID components and features into this project as possible, and then try to save water and use appropriate landscape that we are all aspiring towards at this point in time. So that said, we wrote kind of a cost benefit report to gain support for that. We had an early master plan that talked about why it was important to do what we were doing. And that has evolved into construction documents. And we are at this kind of interesting point. I had hoped that when we were sitting here today, we would be able to say something a little bit grander than what I can tell you right now. So the challenge is that we have final sealed construction package, and we have had 2 attempts at getting construction underway, and that has not happened yet. And I think that has a bit to do with where we are in the market and kind of the volatility of everything that's occurring here. But that's still, all of that's debatable on the reasons we're at. So we're looking at another way of kind of bringing this forward to construction, and that is happening right now. So I would say in probably the next couple of months, we should have a better handle on how long it's going to take to get it built, and we're still moving forward with all of that. And that's really kind of what I have for you right now. I'd hope to be able to say that we were building this thing today, but that's not the case. I'm not sure if there's anything else really to add in there for right now.
Jesse, do you have anything to add?
No.
Yes, and future tour. Mead says future tour for the group, Harry. Yes, eventually.
Sure. Jesse, I'll jump in again. I'm sorry to cut you off again. You asked that question about future tours, and I think I kind of was short on this one. So what I would hope this project to end up being is to showcase as many examples of the types of features that we can fit into the project area. It doesn't have everything, and there's a lot of back and forth as to what's appropriate for where. So we're trying to put as many features in as we can that make sense. We are looking at understanding volume reduction, peak flow from sub watersheds or mini watersheds to these features, sizing them appropriately based on rainfall. So these next steps that I think are beyond what the current practice is, which is build them and hope water goes in there. We're really trying to take an engineering approach to it and trying to take a very rainfall precipitation based approach to that, and that to come out and see how much water we could actually save in terms of capture, passive and active, as well as putting the right plants in the project area that don't really require a whole lot of water to begin with, and changing that whole perspective. So I think, in addition to what Wayne is talking about and standardizing details, it's part of our mission goals as this group to really think about the way we do landscaping in Arizona, the way we manage our water in Arizona, and getting after case examples where you can see it being done differently and having it still be appealing to look at and appropriate for commercial or public agencies is really kind of one of the pieces that we hope to showcase.
Thank you, Harry. Anything to add to that, Jesse?
Yeah, I would just say that, if we could lean a little bit on Tucson, where we're talking about having kind of issues on, having that know-how on how to get it constructed. And when you're trying to push the boundaries, where Tucson, you guys have been doing this for the last 10, 20 years, been running through this stuff. So I think it's just trying to make some connections as far as what's happening down in Tucson, and then teaming them up with the right people here in the Valley to make sure that this thing get built to the right standard.
Great, thank you. We have a couple minutes for questions, and Mead, you had mentioned in the chat as far as how often is MAG's basically Blue Book, they call it, updated, and that comes out annually in January. However, the process runs from what, February through July or August, September-ish. And so that's available online, and then I think the cities can order it. And then as far as information on the meeting, the vote, I've included the link in the chat. We'd love to have a great turnout. I believe all the cities represented as MAG have a representative on that particular committee, correct, Wayne? And so they each have a vote when voting on cases as well. And then as far as the green infrastructure supplement, yeah, that will be our next effort. And Wayne, as the landscape architect at the table, do you have any comments you'd like to mention with that? Because you have been working through this process more so than anybody else, as to maybe your thoughts on that particular document.
Well, it was disappointing that MAG had decided that they didn't want to take up that flag and move it forward. I think there's maybe a couple reasons. Maybe just the members who were on the committees that we were working with really were not versed well enough in what was being tried and what was trying to be done. But I think, over the last 2 years, even as we've been working just with MAG on the standardization of the landscape and irrigation specs, there's been a greater awareness of how we address water and stormwater and other things. And I think while the message has taken a whole lot longer to take hold here in the Phoenix area than it has at all in Tucson, I think we just need to keep working at it and keep pushing these ideas along and let it infiltrate, no pun intended, with those who need to get the message. And I think that will go a long way. And the way society is now with the concerns about water, it's going to become more and more relevant, I think. But in terms of, just the specific details, Harry and Jesse have developed details. We know the Tucson folks have a number of details. Frankly, with this group merging energies and information, I think we can move things along here much quicker than we might have otherwise. So I'm hopeful that the synergy we can bring together here will bring us in the Phoenix area, because the Phoenix area is really where these changes primarily need to happen, will come much sooner than later.
Thank you. Any last questions before we move on?
If I wasn't clear, I was basically asking the Tucson folks to help us. So.
You guys open to that?
And I'd also
we're pushing spaghetti uphill here. So.
Oh, looks like Derek has a question.
Yeah, quick question. Harry, would you be willing to share any of those costs on benefit reports for the Durango campus?
Yeah, we can't do that right at this time because of moving through all of that aspect of construction and all that. But yeah, as we get back in there, you should be able to take a look at those, in a bit later on. Some of the stuff that we did several years ago is kind of orders of magnitude different. But it'll still be useful to kind of as a discussion or a primer for moving some things for you.
Appreciate it.
Great, thank you, Derek. And Stuart, you had a question about maintenance. The
Yes,
elephant in the room, right?
yes. I'd love to hear what plans, if any, you have for training, monitoring, accountability for folks who get their hands on trees or get near them doing work on the street or whatever it might be.
Good question. I know that was always a long-term question, well, issue up for discussion previous to the Green Infrastructure Work Group. I'd say that's on the table for sure.
And I'll just try to respond to that. Is that I think Goodyear, who is doing a study right now on maintenance that is ongoing in different communities for LID. Wayne, is your group involved in that?
Yeah, it's actually, we're doing that study for Buckeye and the
Buckeye
information. And I know that various members here on the call have been contacted about that because that is probably the cost for operation and maintenance of green infrastructure is really non-existent that we can find. And any bits of information that anyone can provide us will be helpful because at least in the Phoenix area, as we have been promoting this type of activity, the primary thing that we get is what's it going to cost us in terms of maintenance? How is it going to change our maintenance practices and what is that cost going to do to us? And the generic response has been, well, it will be different, but it should not necessarily be more. But we don't have hard empirical evidence of that. We have bits and pieces from several of the municipalities. And a lot of it is word of mouth, where this is my experience, but we don't have data. And in the Phoenix area, I'll call it resistance, maybe it's just more indifference, is centered around that issue of not having solid information to share.
Great, thanks, Wayne. We have we need to probably move on just so we make sure to give the Tucson folks their time to present. Blue, do you have a quick question or can we field it at the very, it's a long one? Okay.
We are developing a maintenance program and we will have data on how much it costs probably a year from now. Happy to share.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
We're looking
exciting.
forward to your information.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, good. Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim and Wayne and Harry and Jesse. Really appreciate the information. For those of you, I put the next Menti survey in the chat. If you want to go to menti.com, this one's on ranking water infrastructure solution topics. And it says voting is closed, which it shouldn't be. So if you're having difficulty getting in, let me work on that as we transition over to the Tucson folks. So Mead, I'm going to let you do your introductions and we'll go ahead and get.
So while you all are filling out that survey, I got it to work on my end, so hopefully it's working for you as well. I'll just give a quick intro for our group. Let's see, I haven't shared my screen yet, but let me work that up. Share screen, sorry about this. I think, there we go. Okay. So I have the privilege of introducing several of our region speakers today. First, I'll speak a bit about PAG's efforts for regional work, which includes many partners, so I can't claim it just as PAG, but that's our whole purpose, is regional efforts with our partners. And then we'll have a presentation by Jacob Prietto speaking about where the flood control district in Pima County is going today with their new direction, focusing on climate resilience. And then we'll have City of Tucson, and we'll hear from Irene Ogata, who has a great history of the roots of green infrastructure, how policies got put into place. And then we move on to Blue Baldwin, who is the very exciting new Storm to Shade program in our region, a funded and institutionalized green infrastructure program. So let me know, can you see my screen? Great, okay, thank you.
Well, maybe not. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Not working? Okay.
Yep.
Great. So here's a comprehensive summary of PAG's work, and might be a little overwhelming to look at it all, but that's a resource for you if you want to download the presentations later. I just wanted to mention that there are several topics that could either be future presentations or just giving a little background. In general, for regional projects, we have this ongoing effort with online tools. We invested in the first auto case study to help calibrate a return on investment tool for green infrastructure. Hopefully many of you have already been involved in other iterations of that. We have mapping tools with a focus on environmental equity, ongoing data development to support those tools, such as heat data, tree canopy data, and those are regional in nature because it takes a regional investment to afford to get that for our partners. A lot of this data is used to help set goals. So we put down a lot of those calculations in the last 5 years to a regional green infrastructure plan. Down where you see the regionally cohesive outreach messaging, that's really the roots of PAG's efforts in green infrastructure. We got involved through our stormwater funding. So we had originally an emphasis on bringing together what the public knows about rainwater harvesting with the benefits for stormwater quality. So we have a lot of outreach materials and worked on messaging, especially for the construction industry. And putting on statewide workshops for that. As you may have seen in the chat, PAG's book of standards that we have in our region, just like MAG has for the Maricopa region, hasn't been updated in over 10 years, and the effort that built it was started 10 years before that. So our details are older as well. They are not updated annually because we don't have a ongoing committee, but so many great details have been worked on by the City of Tucson and Pima County since then, and they've been working to compile those and make sure they're agreeable as a regional standard. And so maybe PAG will hear about those in the future for an update, since it wasn't included in the last update. And then we try to support our partners' efforts through regional council resolutions. That was a prior way that we had tried to support efforts and support funding and grants for these green infrastructure practices. And finally, somewhat related to that standards and is creating regional guidance. So we support where regional consistency is needed. And we've been leaning more toward our transportation efforts lately instead of the stormwater quality program. So we created a playbook for transportation with several other partners, including American Rivers. So that's our most recent direction and some of our ongoing efforts. Now I'll introduce our other speakers who will speak a little more detail about some specific projects. So we have Jacob Prietto. He's Chief Hydrologist with Pima County Regional Flood Control District, and he's here to let you know what they've been working on lately.
Thanks, Mead. Yeah, so really quickly, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Wayne, for your presentations. I could have given the same talk. We are also trying to develop GI standards and landscape establishment efforts through all of this in this GI LID world. So I'm glad I'm not doing that talk. But we are doing modeling. You know, we got to look at existing conditions first. We want to do stormwater basins. We want to do these basins in the urban areas, mostly pre-floodplain ordinance. So residential subdivisions that predate retention detention requirements. That's what we're looking for. And land uses of high imperviousness and small drainage areas. You know, if you're familiar with how urban drainage works, you know, the street networks on a grid, they really move the water around in funny ways, and not like traditional natural watersheds. So we look at what watersheds the city of Tucson has needs in, where they need detailed hydrology and urban floodplain to be improved. So we're using Flow2D to map out urban floodplains, and yes, we are looking at the 100-year storm event maps here, but really we just want to know where the water's going. You know, is it turning left? Is it turning right? Is it going straight? And because we don't want to put basins in a place where there's not water. So these models are just one tool on locating where urban drainage concentrates, where it diverges, splits, where it jumps the street and invades private property. Those are the places that we're just interested in locating, and at what magnitudes. You know, we are looking at, you know, 90% of our storms are 1 inch of rainfall or less. So if we don't have these detailed Flow2D models at hand for specific locations, we could delineate a simple watershed and just assume 1 inch of runoff, and just kind of do some back of the envelope calculations for stormwater volumes. Next slide, Mead. Thank you. So this is our first stormwater basin, Seneca Park. It's been the prototype. We're excited with how it turned out. It was a tax lien acquisition by the state of Arizona. The previous property owners didn't pay their taxes, so the state took it. And by state law, if the presiding county has beneficial use for that property, the state could hand it to the county. So it was an old car mechanic shop, and we demoed all that, and we dug in some stormwater basins. Most of our basins at this site are 9 inches deep, and we have some areas that are 18 inches deep, and those are we call them enhanced infiltration basins, 18 inches deep, but filled with angular rock. So we like having those to collect that that end of the event ponded water. So we, it's kind of like a French drain where the last sitting water will collect there underneath the angular rock. And you can see on the bottom left, we're using depressed curbs or a sidewalk scupper. We recognize we're gonna only split. We're not taking all of the water if the inlet's at grade, which they usually will be. So we could do a little hydraulic calculation to see what percentage of flows, depending on the slopes of the road and the slopes of the scupper, what kind of ratios of flow we could get entering the basin. This one's working. You could see the black scars of the urban oils, the street stains going into the basins, and adding a walking path. We worked with the community, the neighborhood association, to get their input on what they wanted. This southwest corner is perched, so it could be more of a passive recreation. There's benches, trash cans, baggies for doggy waste as well. And this is what we're trying to do on lands that have more potential than current usage. So abandoned lots, lots like a tax lien or just bare earth and space. So we're working with Blue and her team to locate the best places for these in some of our older urban neighborhoods. So thank you. That's we're trying to do 1, 2, or 3 of these sites per year, and working with the city to prioritize what city wards are best, or what spaces need more green space, and that's a collaborative effort between us and the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. We were going to save questions for after all the presentations, but I would like, since the topics are a bit diverse, just to call on Trace since he had a more immediate question.
Thank you, Mead. Jacob, what is the approximate size of the watershed that feeds this example? Do you know?
Thank you very much. So we are looking at all watersheds less than a square mile, and we prefer to have a basin footprint up to 1 acre. So those are kind of the metrics we're looking at, just for horizontal footprint and if there's water. So if there's street flow, if there's storm drain flow, we've done a site where we're tapping into a small storm drain system to let that system breathe into the basin and then breathe out as in detention. We're also even looking at small urban washes, small constructed urban washes. We're not really, we don't want to mess with any natural spaces, but maybe divert some of that into offline basins where we could just retain up to 6 or 9 inches of retention, surround it with trees, surround it with low canopy, and yes, irrigate them for establishment periods. And after the county designs and builds these spaces with collaboration with the city. After that establishment period is over, when these spaces are built on city land, then the city of Tucson would take over the maintenance responsibilities.
And Jacob, there's one more question I'd like to have us go into, because in the chat there's a lot of questions about dry wells, water quality, and somebody phrased it as energy passive groundwater recharge products as an alternative to dry wells. So I wanted to turn this question over to Tom Meixner, who had his hand raised to initiate that question.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the Arizona Department of Water Resources is particularly interested in new strategies or ways that we could potentially recharge stormwater. And I know that Maricopa has had maybe some adverse experiences with dry wells. I know that Pima has been looking at it. But I'm sort of curious about, what are the approaches we could take in the future to try to capture stormwater as efficiently as we can. I mean, I think the projects Jacob's talked about in Pima are one mechanism, depending on location and siting. But I don't know if that's for Jacob or Harry. So
as you say, Tom, Pima County Flood Control is now open to investigating dry wells. We have decided to do our research on how dry wells could be a valuable tool for us. We do have a PFAS plume concern in the southeast portion of the city, but we feel that these stormwater basins, ponding up to a foot of water for a few hours a day, that won't have an effect on the deep plume of groundwater contamination. But again, collaboration with the city is the most important part of this. We are here to provide the technical and financial experience to make these projects happen. And I think our relationship has just blossomed over the last year, and hopefully Blue agrees with me.
Well, that's a great segue into the City of Tucson presentations. And for those of you who feel like we're just skimming the surface, that is intentional. We're here to survey what we need to talk about more as a group. And then we'll have a little more time after City of Tucson's presentations. So next up, thank you very much, Jacob. We might have more questions for you in the chat as well. So next, I'll hand it off to Irene. She's the Urban Landscape Manager at City of Tucson. She's housed in the Public Information and Conservation Office at Tucson Water. And she has been working all along on all these efforts and will help us jump into what some of the roots are of some of the progress in the region.
Thanks, Mead. So I only have the one slide, and I know probably 85 to 95% of you have seen this slide. I sort of presented the first rendition of it back in 2019 when Anne had asked me to do a presentation for the Shade Conference. So this was sort of how we got to where we are today in terms of green infrastructure and rainwater harvesting. So, I started back in this timeline back in 2000, but it probably starts even prior to this. So just so you don't have to read everything, the color coding is sort of like how we've worked with the university, how we've developed the LIDGI working group, how we work TAG, and how the city has moved forward both from the city's transportation department as well as Tucson Water. And we here in the city with the GSI have also been partnering with the National Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange, which is just of municipal staff people, to try and jumpstart in all of our communities how to move these forward. So what this sort of illustrates is that as we've been saying, both Anne and Mead and even Jacob, it's not only one entity that has moved all of these actions forward. It's been also with our community groups and nonprofits and universities that has helped us do all of this. What also this timeline shows is activities on the north side or the upper part of the timeline are really more of those non-regulatory actions that we've done. You know, those are more the community actions, not really mandated in any way. Whereas those actions on the bottom of the timeline are those that are much more ordinance related. So again, this timeline also illustrates how it's been an action of both the community and moving forward with regulatory actions as well. So I think that pretty much gets to where I am. Oh, and the other thing I added, and I think this was when Harry, or maybe it was Tim, who had asked me to also do a presentation when you were doing your FEMA work and how to add GSI into the hazard mitigation sort of stuff and using UHI as part of those mitigation. So I went up there and presented with Anne or Marie Light, but I think Marie Light was also sick that day. So I had to present her part. So in the orange color, you'll see what I added in terms of what Pima County started doing from the regulatory standpoint in moving forward with GSI and a lot of these water harvesting sort of issues. And then I think it was, maybe have to add a few more things in about somewhere around 2010, 2012. I think that's when Evan Canfield and I went up to Phoenix via an invitation from Anne, and I presented the Low Impact Development and Green Infrastructure Guidance Manual that Pima County and City of Tucson was putting together. So that was sort of the first initial collaboration we had with this group. So I'm familiar with probably 90% of you, because I try to log on again to see what you all are doing, to see what we can steal from you to bring down here, because I think you have been moving pretty fast forward. You know, Tim and Harry and all the other folks who have been working on the manuals and the standards probably had gotten a little further in terms of standardization and doing those sort of things that we haven't quite gotten to yet down here. And so in 2021, that's when the city started hiring the program that now Blue directs, you know, the GI program, because we now have funding for it. And that's only within the city of Tucson. On everyone's water bill, all our customers get a GSI fee tacked on, which I think it's 13 cents per CCFs. We estimate that'll be maybe 3 million plus to run the program. So that's where the funding comes from for us to move forward with the program. So then I'll hand it over to Blue on how she's been doing that.
Great. Should I take it away, Mead, or did you want to say anything in the interim? I'll take it away. Okay. Wonderful. Thanks, Irene, so much for painting the picture and all of the work that you've done to get us here today and to everybody else in this group. I will just start with a disclaimer. I've been in this position with the city for 1.5 years. So though I've worked in water harvesting, rainwater harvesting, both actively and passively for about the last 15 years. I'm very new to this position, so I am not a great source of institutional knowledge at this point. Irene is the font. So we can advance this slide, Mead. Thank you. It's happening. There we go. Okay, so as Irene mentioned, my position came into existence in 2021. We started assessing that small fee on folks' water utility bills in 2019, I believe. And that is a fee, just like Irene said, on people's water bills at 13 cents per CCF, which averages out to about $1 extra for the average household. So that program was developed at the direction of the City of Tucson's mayor and council with two primary mandates. One was to build new green stormwater infrastructure throughout the 6 wards of the City of Tucson. So that pot of funding that we have is divided equally among the 6 wards, and the mayor's office has her own equal allocation as well. And the second mandate, and this is a very important one that I know everybody wants to talk more about, is to have a program that can maintain existing GSI and any new GSI that we build. Because I'm sure, as most of us know, lots and lots, particularly of in-street GSI was built over the past decades using MOUs and agreements with communities and neighborhood associations that they would be the ones to maintain that infrastructure. And for as well-intended as all of that is, it often fails. Things fall through the cracks, people move out, or they age out, or they die, and then we're left with all this infrastructure that's not getting maintained, and at the least becomes a bit of an eyesore, and at worst is hosting invasive plant species, causing flooding, et cetera, et cetera. And so the maintenance piece of this program was very intentional from the get-go. This is just our little handy dandy public facing graphic that shows all of the wonderful benefits of green stormwater infrastructure. We can go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk a bit about how our capital program works. We have a capital projects manager who is John Choi, and he is the one who is responsible for identifying potential new projects and seeing those from concept through completion. So the way that we're identifying these new projects is, first, we're looking at existing City of Tucson improvement projects. There is a very large bond that passed a couple of years ago to improve the City of Tucson's parks and connections. So bicycle boulevards, greenways, pedestrian walkways, etc. We're looking at all of those projects and seeing if we can dovetail our efforts to add additional funds to add green stormwater infrastructure to those projects. That is working extremely well for us because a lot of these projects are on very slim budgets, and many of them don't even have budgets to add landscape at all. And so we're able to collaborate with the project managers advancing these projects and have these discussions about where we can add GSI to bring additional value to the projects and to beautify them, to provide shade and all of the benefits that GSI brings. We also work very closely with each of the 6 ward offices and the mayor's office to get their perspective on where GSI is most needed in their communities. Invaluable information straight from the grassroots. And then we also use a tool called the Tree Equity Score, which is also used by our urban forestry program. I see Nicole is in this meeting, and so Nicole brought this to us. The Tree Equity Score, if you haven't heard of it, is something you should definitely look up. It's a really awesome, handy GIS-based tool that basically mashes up data layers that cover both socioeconomic and demographic indicators, as well as environmental indicators, such as percent of tree canopy, heat vulnerability, flooding, etc. Takes all that stuff, smushes it into one map that is color coded so that we can identify which areas in each ward are most in need of investment of green infrastructure. So at this point, I am delighted to say that in our 1.5 years of existence, we presently have approximately 30 projects in the pipeline either in or some stage of design or about to enter design. And we have two that are about to enter construction and one that is in construction. So we're finally seeing the results of lots of efforts. It's very exciting. Next slide, Mead. Thank you. This is the one that covers our maintenance program. And so, as I mentioned, to be able to do maintenance was a huge priority for this program. We are presently creating an enterprise asset management system to be able to contain all of the GSI that exists throughout the city. But the challenge of this is that it exists in different realms. So there's some GSI in the city that is in the realm of the Department of Transportation Mobility. These are chicanes, traffic circles, in-street GSI features. Then there's other GSI that lives in parks. And then there's GSI that lives in ward offices. And there is not a unified asset management system to bring it all together to see what we've got, be able to manage the work for that, and to be able to track expenses related to that work. So Brooke Bushman is our maintenance program manager. She is amazing, and she is working diligently on building that system as we speak. We also realized we needed to create a maintenance protocol for GSI for the city of Tucson specifically. There are some wonderful protocols out there, but we really wanted to make one that was targeting our city of Tucson internal staff predominantly, and the contractors that we are hiring to be able to do this work. And so with that in mind, we were lucky enough to have a grant partnership with the U of A, which has allowed us to do a really thorough community engagement process to hear people's input into what we need to be talking about and thinking about when we think about doing GSI maintenance in community. Everything from one person's weed is another person's wildflower, and how do we reconcile that, to the importance of building healthy soil, to having conversations about how we do outreach in communities around the maintenance of GSI when these are communities that have traditionally been marginalized and underinvested in, and may have trust as far as working with the city. And so lots of conversation from that. We distilled information, we created a protocol, and we now have a very handy dandy little maintenance guide that we literally just picked up from the printers earlier yesterday. So I hope that everyone will have a chance to get their hands on that. Actually, when I introduced myself in the chat way back up here, I put a link to our Storm to Shade program webpage, and it is available there as a PDF if you just scroll a bit down on the Storm to Shade's webpage. Next, we hired contractors specifically to do the maintenance of GSI. So we're not expecting our park staff groundskeepers to do the maintenance. We're not expecting Department of Transportation Mobility streets workers to do the maintenance. We are hiring a workforce specifically for this work. We published an RFQ. We hired 6 out of 7 of the contractors that responded to that RFQ. They are a mix of nonprofit organizations like Tucson Audubon Society and Tucson Clean and Beautiful, a couple of small specialist landscaping companies that do GSI work specifically. And we also hired Santa Rita, which is a very big landscaping company. We're really excited to have one of the big players in the room so that we can really move the needle. And I'm sure all of you are thinking, how are you going to hold them accountable? We included in their contract that they would attend Pima County Smartscape training, that they would adhere to all of the protocol outlined in the GSI maintenance manual, and they are liable for any damage that they do. And it's really exciting because they're very much on board. I think they're wise enough to see that green stormwater infrastructure is a field that's only expanding and growing, and they're excited to work with us. We also held Final Bullet, a series of trainings of the GSI protocol for both internal city staff and community members, and that will become an ongoing training for internal city staff. Great, thanks Mead. We can go to the next one. This is just a screen grab of the tree equity score tool. So you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wards of the city, and those deep dark orange squares are spots that have the lowest tree equity score. meaning they are the hottest, the most barren, and where we have the most vulnerable populations. So we're using this tool both to prioritize our capital investment, but also to prioritize where we deploy our initial maintenance efforts. Our maintenance budget is minuscule compared to other city budgets, and so we have to be very strategic in how we prioritize where we're going to be working initially, and hopefully that maintenance budget will grow over time. Okay, I think I'm finished, Mead. Is that the last slide? Great, thank you. I'm sorry I went over.
This is your preview.
Oh, the preview, yes. We don't have to spend much time on this because folks can go, I think you have to press it again. Sorry, yeah, there we go. Folks can actually get it on our website now.
Great. Thank you so much, Blue and Irene. It's really exciting to see those programs come to be, so much progress recently, and all the context Irene provided. And I would like to check in with Anne about our timing and how we should spend the last couple minutes of our meeting, perhaps going through the poll results.
Yes, I actually put a poll in the chat, which is what topics do you want to discuss more? And they kind of refer to the questions that we had previously. And I was going to, oh, if you want to stop sharing your screen,
Yes.
Mead, I can show everybody kind of where the, let's see here.
Just a sec. Okay, so we'll move on to that. But please enter into the chat any questions you have for Blue and Irene so that we don't skip over those.
Yeah, absolutely. Address their questions first.
Would you like to spend a little time, Anne?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Does anyone have comments for the city of Tucson, especially any curiosities about how that timeline compares to other regions, perhaps? I don't see any hands raised just yet.
No. I'm just totally jealous from a Maricopa County perspective that you have this program and the funding source and the maintenance to go with it. I'm very excited to see how this all works out and your lessons learned in the process.
I know that a lot of interest in LID grew out of a need to conserve water in our region prior to even having the Central Arizona project supply. So I'm curious how the Phoenix region might grow in grassroots efforts as well and pick up elements that you saw in Irene's timeline.
Yes. And by the way, if all of our presenters could share, I know we've received some of the presentations from different people, but if you showed something that wasn't shared, send that to me and I'll make sure we add that to the Sustainable Cities Network meeting page so we can share those with everyone afterwards. As you can see, the topics that are most interest based on the poll, desired GI and LID outcomes seems to be just inching out the water infrastructure solutions. And then of course, funding is always an issue, partnerships, and then equity and best practices. So that gives you an idea of kind of what the general consensus might be for where we start our next meeting as well. And if those of you want to stick around afterwards, I can certainly show you the outcomes from the previous polling surveys. Otherwise, I'll put them into a Word doc and I can post those as well too. Any final questions or comments? I know, Mead, we're over time a little bit and I appreciate everybody's, kind of sticking it out afterwards. This has been a great discussion and I wanted to pull up when the next joint meeting would be because we talked about doing them quarterly and that would fall in November, I believe, on the 14th at 3 p.m. Does that sound about right? I think that's the date. So we'll make sure that everybody is aware of that next virtual meeting option. And just so folks know, our next green infrastructure work group for SCN is scheduled for September 20th, which is the third Tuesday of the month, from 1 to 2:30. And I mean, you're all welcome to participate, whether you're from Maricopa County or Pima County. So feel free to, you know, pop in and listen in if you like. And then I think, Mead, your next Southern Arizona LID work group meeting is the week before that on September 12th, correct? And you meet at 3 p.m. Right.
We switched.
Oh, okay.
We switched a little bit to sync up with the timing of this meeting next month.
Great.
We'll be meeting in 1 month on this same.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Well, any closing comments from anyone?
Thank you, Anne, for coming
Yeah.
up with the idea of meeting together.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say on behalf of SCN and Tim, it looked like you wanted to say something, but just thank you so much for all joining us today. And we hope this leads to bigger discussions and project ideas. If you have any suggestions, don't hesitate to let us know, because we're happy to put those kind of on our growing list of priority areas. Tim, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a shout out about the next outside of the right-of-way meeting, which is coming up this week. But we'd encourage anyone that's engaged in this type of topic to get involved. We need some help with getting some of the designs of the details corrected, if you will, or adjusted at least, and also bring forward new details. We would love to see new details. And again, these will be for outside of the right-of-way, which is not exterior pamphlet that Wayne had kind of discussed. That will be part of the MAG outside of the right-of-way groups contributation. I can't even say it.
Yeah, and that group meets through MS Teams this Thursday from 11 to 12. If anybody's interested, feel free to drop me an email, and I'm happy to send the information to you.
Thank you. That's all.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's great to see everyone. Have a fantastic day. And I will stop the recording now. And